This is Rob Tebbutt for Boxing Social in association with Betfred. Delighted to be joined for the first time by Matt Windle. We're here in sunny old Birmingham. Definitely not sunny. Matt, how you doing? Nice to speak to you.
Nice to speak to you as well. Thank you for having us.
No problem at all. No problem at all. I'm going to observe the pleasantries as I do with everybody else beforehand. How are you getting on? Been a while since we've seen you in the ring. How you been holding up?
Yeah, it's been all right. I think for me and for most boxers, things are probably not as different as what they are for most other people. Like, we're used to not being able to go to the cinemas or go to restaurants and being in a strict routine. So in that sense, things haven't changed a great deal for me. I'm used to not seeing my friends for months at a time. It's more the not being able to get out and fight that's been a big difference, and just trying to tick over in the gym as best as you can.
You make a good point there, actually. I've asked probably every fighter that I've interviewed over the last year or so about that, and you're the first fighter who's come up with that. It's a really good point, the fact that you don't go out to pubs, you don't go out to night. Well, you shouldn't, we're on camera now, so he definitely doesn't do that. But what thing, apart from the obvious, which is fighting and earning your living, what thing has been the most difficult thing to kind of live without over this period of time?
Well, like most of the other lads, I also work as well. So I work in schools, but I'm freelance, so being a self-employed artist that works within schools, you've got Rishi telling us that artists need to retrain and get proper jobs, and you've got schools that are closing and schools that are open potentially aren't accepting external visitors. So with regards to me working in schools, it's been really difficult. Doing Zoom and Teams and online sessions, but there's nothing beats that interaction. Started doing some mentoring, so I got my mentoring qualification during lockdown as well, so I can work. I'm used to working with large groups, classes of 30, 60, 100, 250, yeah. So I work with big numbers, so this is more of a one-on-one or a two-on-one basis now. So I'm working with young people in care homes and stuff at the moment, which they need the support during these times more than anyone, and it just kind of keeps me in a bit of a routine, gives you an excuse to set your alarm for 6 in the morning and get out to work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Just backtrack a little bit there. I didn't know that about you. You're an artist. What type of art?
Poetry.
Okay.
So, yeah, I'm a poet. So one of my nicknames is the Poet with Punch. So I was a young Poet Laureate of Birmingham way back in 2007, and the Poet Laureate of Birmingham back 2016 to 18. So a bit of spoken word and performance. So I go into schools predominantly. I write for corporate businesses and stuff as well, but mainly I go into schools, work with young people, help with their literacy engagement, prepare the older ones for their exams, and help them with their confidence, but also just encourage them to pursue their passions. So one of the things I say to them is that I'm not there to convince them that boxing and or poetry are the best things in the world. What they are the best things in the world for me, and I want them to pursue their passions and go after the things that are the best things in the world for them, whether it's a cool, trendy thing that they'd be supported by most of their peers, or whether it's something not as cool and trendy, like when you're a 15-year-old lad writing poetry, going after it anyway.
Right, so you've kind of struck a good chord here, because I used to be a bit of a lovey myself. Didn't write poetry. My poetry would be terrible, but I used to quite enjoy reading some poetry back in the day. What kind of, was that something that you were always kind of inclined to go towards? I mean, when I was at school, I could only really do English, and everything else I was rubbish at. Was that kind of the route that you went with it? And also, how did it kind of dovetail with boxing?
It was really strange, because I never thought anything of it at the time, but I remember being in year 3, so I was like 7 years of age, and we had to write limericks, and I was the first person to finish, and the teacher was like, okay, write another one. So I wrote another one, and she's like, okay, go and help everybody else in the class. As a 7-year-old, I was walking around helping other children in the class to write poetry, and then 10 and then 20 plus years later, that's what I was doing for a living. So when you look back, you go, it's something I've always kind of had a passion and a bit of a talent for. Then when I got into senior school, kind of grow out of that, and it's more rap and hip hop and getting into that kind of scene and writing lyrics and spitting bars and stuff, but it's still writing nonetheless. And then I got into quite a bit of trouble at school, and I ended up at a Prue school, and we was doing our work experience and our coursework there, and she said, the teacher said to me, you need to write a story or a poem on the theme of homelessness. And at the time I wasn't really fussed which I was going to do, and then she said, the story needs to be 2 pages and the poem needs to be 1 page. And I was like, boom, I'm doing a poem. I'm being lazy, half the work. Do you know what I mean? I was going to write 1 page. I can rhyme. I know all poetry doesn't have to rhyme, but I was like, I can rhyme. I'll write a little poem. And she was impressed with it. Next English lesson, she put this application in front of me and it said, could you be Birmingham's next young poet? And I was like, Laurie, what's that word say, miss? And that word was laureate. And I didn't know that you could be kind of a living, young, sort of naughty, poet. I didn't know that. I knew people wrote poetry, but I didn't know they existed. Like every poet that I'd ever heard of was either dead old or dead. Do you know what I mean? So I won the Young Poet Laureate competition then, not the first time of asking. I entered the second year, won. That gave me the platform then I was the first male in the country to be a Young Poet Laureate. So then that put me in front of teachers and young people and schools, so they come up to me afterwards and go, our kids really like that. They normally hate poetry. Do you come into schools? So you'd network and exchange details. I'd go into the schools. One school always knows another school. So it's people ask me about advertisement and stuff. It's just word of mouth, really. It's teachers telling other teachers and recommendations. And it's taken me from Birmingham all over the country, Darlington, Cornwall, Norwich, Hereford, and right away across the world. I've done poetry in Austria, Germany, worked in primary and secondary schools in Malaysia and Indonesia. So it's been fantastic.
We should probably move off of poetry, but we're not going to. Poetry Social, big it up. One last question on that. You mentioned there about kind of dead poets or dead old or whatever. Have a favourite poet? I'm not going to ask you your favourite poem yet. I will at the end of the interview. But your favourite poet or poets that influenced you?
So my favourite poet that I think would be a good poet for people to potentially check out that maybe want to see what it's about is a guy called Buddy Wakefield. He's an American guy, he's contemporary, he's the most toured poet in history, and some of the things that he comes out with is just utterly insane. The way I kind of compare him to any other one that's good with poetry is to say, imagine with football, and you hadn't saw Messi or Ronaldo, and then you watch, Rooney or someone for the first time, and you think they're amazing, and then you go and watch Messi or Ronaldo, and you realise just how good those guys are. That's Buddy Wakefield for me. You listen to other poets, and you're like, they're amazing, and then you listen to Buddy Wakefield, and he's a 3-time world poetry champion, and he's just nuts. And I've got to meet him a few times, and we've got a face-off photo because he's really into his boxing as well. So we've got a face-off photo with each other, which is cool. So anything by Buddy Wakefield is something I'd recommend.
I'll have a listen on the way home. So that's the poet. What about the punching? How did because those two things are don't really go. I think the only other person is Chris Eubank Senior. But outside of that, I think you're probably the first I've come across. How did you kind of put the two together, really?
Well, that came at the same time. I went from a 12-month period of being neither to both. So again, I was excluded from school at my pre-school, and I was then had time on my hands. I was there every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday morning at my pre-school, and whilst I didn't get on well at school, I didn't want to just be a bum. I knew I wanted to do something with my life. Around the same time, I got banned from playing football and stuff as well by the FA for, got fights with parents and stuff. So I was like, I really want to try boxing. When I was 10, my dad would have let me try boxing because I asked about it, but my mum was like, oh, my baby's not boxing. She's understandable, I get it. So when we was 15, now it's like, all right, we'll take him to the gym, see if he's anywhere near as tough as what he thinks he is, and if he's not, we'll pack it in. 15 and a half years later or whatever, here we are doing this interview. So it was two things that were separate, but not intentionally. It was just I'd write my poetry or do something in the day, and then I'd go to the gym on the night time, because I've always been the sort of person, if I want to do something, I'll do it. I don't think about what other people might think about it. So I never once thought, oh, what will people think about me writing poetry? Because I just didn't care. So it was only when people started to say to me, oh, boxing and poetry, that's unusual. And I was like, yeah, I guess so. I guess it is. But I didn't know. And then I kind of was doing it for a few years then, and they were both kind of separate. And it was probably, I don't know, going from the 2010s onwards then, that I started to sort of mix the two. Schools then started to ask, well, do you do any boxercise sessions? And so I got my amateur coaching badge, so I know I could do my boxercise anyway, but it just looked better than rather at the time saying I can do boxercise because I'm an amateur boxer. say I'm a qualified England boxing coach, that looked better to be doing boxercise sessions. And then you find the whole rhythm and performance, timing, the dedication. There are so many variables that intertwine with one another. I get young people right into kind of a 4-beat rhythm. And then when we're practicing our basic footwork of like forward, left, back, right, it's the same 4-beat rhythm. So the tempo could change, but the rhythm itself is the same. It's a performance. You know, when I get up on stage to say a poem, it's obviously that's a performance. But when I get into the ring to have a fight, that's our performance. When I'm at my computer writing a poem, that's me coming to the gym and training and working on my craft. You know, you don't just wake up and the poems magically appeared on a sheet of paper. You know, these things take time and dedication. And most importantly, I think they're both art forms. You know, people often go to me, oh, is boxing an art form? And it's like, well, it's a martial art. So, yeah, it most definitely is an art form. So they're kind of opposite ends of the scale, but the scale that's connected to the same centerpiece. They're not totally different parts of the universe. They are connected as well. Poetry in motion.
It's a really interesting way to look at things, and the name that immediately jumps out to my mind, because it was his birthday yesterday, is Nassim Hamed, and kind of the Ingle Gym, and how music and rhythm, as you say, is kind of a big thing, and certainly the late great Brendan Ingle's training and teachings. Let's talk about your boxing. As I said at the start of the interview, it's, you know, I say your recent boxing, but you haven't boxed now since the end of 2019. As I understand it, the streets tell me that you've had a couple of interesting decisions go against you in your career. Let's talk about those first of all.
Yeah, a couple of questionable decisions. March 2019, I challenged Ijaz Ahmed for his Midland title over 10 rounds. I knocked him down in the second round. It was a great fight, up for one of the Fights of the Year candidates, but I thought that I did more than enough, especially with the knockdown as well, because, you know, I know it's just one extra point, but in close fights that can be a lot, you know. So I thought I did more than enough for that, and then the board issued an immediate rematch, to which he then vacated. So me and David Seymour then fought for the vacant title, and you know, I get on really. Me and Ijaz were all right, but we're kind of still active rivals. Whereas I get on well with Dave. He's unfortunately had to retire since our fight, and I really like Dave. So I'm not trying to badmouth anyone or anything like that, but I thought I did more than enough to win that. I mean, the one positive that I took from that was the fight was in the top 10 British Fights of the Year to happen on British soil. Josh Taylor and Prograis was number 1 of that list, and we were part of that list. So even if I lose, or even when I lose in good fights, which is one thing that I like. I'm very conscious of trying to entertain and being very appreciative that people pay their hard-earned money to come and support us, and ticket sales is so important to boxers like myself and Jack and Swig, that I'm very appreciative of people that come out to support us. But you know, I felt I could have won both of the fights, and I didn't get either of them. They're both online, so I think me and Ijaz is on YouTube, and me and Seymour is on Facebook, I think, so people can go away and watch it at their will.
Please do let us know what you thought of both fights in the comments. Where does that leave you now? Obviously, you mentioned a good point there. A lot of fighters all over the UK and indeed the world are kind of at the mercy of COVID and crowds returning. When are you going to get a fight? When is looking likely for you in your mind?
So I can't talk too specifically because nothing's actually.
Just give me a general. This is all. This is all just, you know.
Nothing's been completely confirmed yet, which is the only reason we're still waiting on kind of I's to be dotted and T's to be crossed and all that. We're hoping sort of April, May time we're going to have something come through. If it does, it will potentially be the biggest fight of my career and a huge opportunity. It's an opportunity that I've tried to forge out for myself. Spoke to my manager, PJ Rose, and said, what are the opportunities or the potentials of this happening? He's made the phone calls that need to be made. Spoke to the people that in the know, said, I think we could potentially do that, yes. So we're just waiting for absolute confirmation from all the boxing councils and people that need to get. But me and the other guys' team, they've said that they're happy to fight. We've said we're happy to fight. Sort of the weight and everything's been agreed. So we're hoping April, May time, but of course then I guess it all comes down to what the regulations and stuff are with COVID, because I think they're hoping to have at least some people in attendance by the time we come to fight. So I guess Boris's announcement will dictate quite when that will happen, but hopefully within the next 2 to 3 months we'll have something properly to train for.
Well, I can see the glint in your eyes and the excited look on your face. I'm very much looking forward to hearing that news, hopefully in April or May. You know what's coming next. Before I let you go, I have to have a poem. Now, the only other person who comes onto Boxing Social and does poetry is Chris Eubank Sr. So there's some big shoes to fill, and I think I'll probably send him this actually afterwards. He'll probably get a little bit jealous. The floor is all yours, the punching poet. Here is your microphone. Give us something.
I'll keep it really, really quick. It's only about a minute long, this piece, and it will just kind of summarise the past 15 years for me. It's called Brawling and Rhyming. Any road to fulfilment is paved with resilience, because life isn't all highlight reels and brilliance. It's filled with mistakes that you need to learn from. Accepting the pros and the cons is what makes you as a person. See, I was thrown out of school when I was just 15. I only ended up with 3 GCSEs, no more mainstream schooling. I was sent to a PRU, the same system that half of British prisoners go through. My parents were petrified and personified stressed, and I was talking to counsellors and feeling depressed. Street life antics got me stabbed in my hand and my leg. I was thinking, how could I be so far behind when I want to get ahead? But then I took up boxing, and that gave me a vision, as well as entering the Young Poet Laureate competition, which was very middle class and filled with grammar school girls. But a new form of expression now existed in my world. And I made the final, only to lose out. I also didn't win my first amateur bout, but fast forward to now, and I'm just your typical pro boxing poet laureate that aims to inspire. I work with young people, providing the sparks for their fire. I've gone from being excluded for talking and fighting to making a living from brawling and rhyming. That's why I wear my smile and my scars with humility and pride. And I may not always succeed at the first attempt, but that will never stop me from trying. Cheers.
Matt Windle, the punching poet, thank you very much for speaking to Boxing Social. This was a really, really fascinating interview. Would really love to do it again sometime. Look forward to your very, very exciting announcement, which you'll tell me off camera in a minute anyway. Thanks very much for speaking to Boxing Social.
Appreciate it. Thank you very much.
That was great. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you. It was great.